Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mini Ninjas, but I also happen to be Mr. A, which in this case, as you can probably tell by what's going on the screen here, this will be a new video set involving my spriting/animation process here. Last time I kind of showed what I did in order to take one of the still frames that I kind of developed and how I worked it into a full-fledged animation. In that case being of Avatar Korra from the Avatar Legend of Korra animation series. And this time around I actually decided to go along what I would do to kind of show my process of building up another animation, but in this case taking something older that I had been working on and just kind of accidentally forgot about and left on the wayside, and what I do to kind of fix up my older stuff, which I use a slightly different process for, or in this case is just generally not as polished. Now, as you can tell probably what's going on here, this particular animation, the first few frames are pretty well rendered. I'll probably need to do an adjustment or two, but for the most part they're done. But get around to the 7th or so frame of this currently 10 frame animation, and you can start telling that I haven't exactly finished the last few frames. These are just the really blocked in frames just to get the general motion. And of course I have still to develop an extra frame or two in order to explain transition from this turned around state to back to the idle stance or state 0. Now as for how rough this animation was where I started originally, I kind of just found the original work files off the top of my head maybe yesterday afternoon, maybe 3 or 4 p.m. around here, and it looked like honestly a lot like the last few frames here, but it was definitely much more stiff. The original animation, as I'm actually loading up right now here, was basically just some really loosely drawn keyframes just to get a general idea of the animation, and as you can see right here, it was incredibly stiff and unpolished. While it did keep the spirit for a lot of the really early frames, where you could tell I made sure to spend at least a decent amount of time kind of blocking in some rudimentary shading here and body proportions, although admittedly the upper body here is definitely skewed. This lower body is way too small in order to work properly. You can really tell around the last 2 frames where I just kind of loosely penciled everything in just to see, okay, how would it look like if the character was kind of swinging in this way, and just working on the general what's the word I'm looking for here? No, I can't think of it right now, but just kind of working out the general positioning of the character without too much attention to detail, which unfortunately now that I'm coming back to it I realized this was a terrible idea. I really should have polished this stuff, or at least done the rudimentary shading as I did in the first few frames. I really should have done it later on as well, a little more so, because at this point it was really hard to understand what I had drawn there. And there's no real transition between how is the back foot suddenly standing all the way forward, and now she's standing pretty upright and leaning kind of forward, where admittedly when you actually think about it, she would be doing more of the leaning back, which is what I did when I began to adjust these frames later on yesterday. And why I bothered punching in something like this kind of general giant tuft of hair, or whatever the heck you can call it for this character, I just kind of refer to it as hair because even though her body's kind of the whole same kind of rubbery thing, she just kind of formed it as hair anyway, or that's what it was in design, so that's how I've been working with it this whole time. And why I bother putting this? Because it doesn't match the body movements at all here, which I began to kind of work on here. The hair is now officially moving forward to kind of acknowledge that yes, the whole body is shifting in a certain direction, and the hair really should follow, even though with the way I kind of rendered the hair here, which I'll now demonstrate with the proper layering that I've got in this work file, the hair honestly blocks a lot of what's going around on the back, which even though you honestly can't see it in these frames, I did render the back too, which I did mostly for the reason that if for some reason I feel the need to do something involving showing her back later, or have it so she's moving forward, but the hair obviously wouldn't be blocking the entire view. I can always just look back at these frames and kind of check, okay, what did I do in order to draw the back before, and I can kind of use it as references for myself later. And basically I started kind of doing a general process of taking the really stiff frames before kind of copying them, or copying the frame over, and then slowly but surely shifting parts here. In case you can really see, I started adding instead of the leaning forward the whole time, I really started pushing her back so that her heavier axe hand is actually swinging her backwards before she starts going back into a more neutral spot, which I'm still in the process of doing, but by the end of this will be a wrapped up animation which has her properly transitioning forward and then back to this stance. Alright, before I go into too much further detail of what I'm going to need to do here, just going to bring up that this particular character is actually an original character designed by a gentleman named Dipod, who also is referred to as High Vault 07 if you happen to check out DeviantArt. I'm pretty sure if you're looking at this and you got here from my DeviantArt page, you've definitely noticed I've referred to him and his DeviantArt stuff on more than one occasion. And in this case, I should also mention, if you're wondering why Geno looks slightly different here than what you would see on a Dipod's own page, in particular the hair here, it's actually because when I started animating this stuff initially, I had actually based it off an older design that he had done of Genocyde, before he had decided to basically switch up the hair to something that was a little easier to render at times. And definitely that's something that probably will come up later with this kind of odd tuft of hair that's kind of standing out here, and then kind of breaking down into the larger hair clump, where in his case it's kind of more one giant... One second, let me actually get a... kind of roughly pixel this in to show it. Instead of this kind of giant hair clump, it's actually more of a... On top of the character's forehead, there's basically this one clump of general hair, no bangs or anything like what had been existing here, or what exists in this current frame. And building up from the bangs would be one giant kind of flowing clump of hair that would go from the back of the head here to all the rest of the way down. Now, you'll have to forgive how rudely rendered this is, but it's just kind of a loose example of how he changed here. Now, I can understand the reasons for changing it, mostly being that by removing all the bangs and everything, you don't have to worry about as many swinging parts as what will be going on in my own set here. And generally, he uses it to have a lot of fun transitioning the hair into the attacks a bit more than what I've done up to this point. Although, admittedly, since it's a really good idea, I might have to actually put the hair into a few more things myself, but I'll try not to do it too much, because clearly he got to that bit first, and after all, it is his character. So he kind of knows the ins and outs a lot more than I do. Alright, I believe that'll be enough for this particular this intro to this new series here. So when we tune back in next time, I'll begin the serious work of finishing up this animation and kind of explaining what I have to do in order to get this thing to work, for lack of a better term. Thank you very much, and see you next time.